Owen stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately felt dozens of eyes watching him. The landing platform of Verdant Station stretched wide and busy with alien workers hauling cargo crates and refueling ships. The air smelled like metal and something sweet he could not name. He adjusted his pack and walked toward the expedition gathering point. 3 alien species waited near a stack of equipment. The first group looked like walking insects with shells that gleamed like polished stone. Their bodies clicked and chittered as they moved. The second group resembled trees that had learned to walk, with bark-covered limbs and faces carved from wood. The third species stood solid as boulders, their skin appearing more like granite than flesh. A creature from the insect group approached Owen. Its hard shell caught the station lights as it circled him slowly. One sharp foreclaw reached out and pressed against Owen's bare forearm. The claw dimpled his skin easily. "Soft," the creature said in a voice like crackling leaves. "Too soft for Tanglewood." Owen pulled his arm back politely. "Il fast." The insect being made a sound that might have been laughter. Healing means nothing when thorns punch through you like wet paper. It turned to the others. Click thinks the human will not survive day one. One of the tree-like aliens stepped forward. Rough bark covered its entire body in thick protective layers. Basswood has seen many species try the deep forest. All wore metal suits. All struggled. You were only cloth and skin. The alien's wooden face showed something like concern. "Perhaps you should reconsider this assignment." Owen shook his head. "I was sent here to map the medicinal plants. That is what I will do." A voice like grinding rocks spoke from behind. "Then you will observe only." The boulder-skinned alien moved closer. "Granite leads this expedition. Granite decides who goes where. You stay at base camp. You watch. You do not enter danger zones." "I'm trained for field work," Owen said carefully. "Training cannot replace proper armor." Granite gestured at Owen's exposed hands and neck. "One scratch from a razor leaf vine, and you bleed out in minutes. One brush against needlegrass and toxins flood your system. Tanglewood does not forgive soft flesh." Owen wanted to argue, but bit his tongue. He needed to be on this expedition. The research mattered too much. "I understand. I will follow your rules." Granite studied him for a long moment. "Good. We depart at first light. Prepare your observation equipment." The group dispersed to check their gear. Owen found a quiet corner and opened his pack. Inside sat his real field equipment, scanning tools and sample containers and climbing rope. He had not come all this way to sit at a camp and watch others do his job. That night, Owen barely slept. He reviewed everything he knew about Tanglewood. The planet earned its reputation as one of the most hostile wilderness zones in the sector. Plant life had evolved aggressive defenses over millions of years. Thorns that could pierce steel, vines that secreted acid, leaves sharp enough to cut bone. Most species considered the deep jungle completely impassable without heavy mechanized protection. But Owen had studied human biology extensively before accepting this assignment. Human skin was not armor. That much was true. It was something potentially better. It was alive. It adapted. It healed. Every cut triggered a cascade of cellular responses. Every scrape taught the body to grow back tougher. Every exposure to toxins trained the immune system to recognize and neutralize. The aliens saw human skin as a weakness. Owen saw it as the most sophisticated survival tool humanity possessed. Morning arrived cold and gray. The expedition team gathered at the station's outer airlock. Everyone wore their protective gear. The insect beings had strapped on additional shell plating. The tree people wrapped themselves in extra bark layers. The rock-skinned aliens sealed their joints with hardened resin. Owen wore his standard field clothes, a simple shirt and pants made from durable fabric. His arms remained bare, his neck exposed. He caught Click staring at him with what looked like pity. The airlock opened and Tanglewood's wilderness spread before them. Dense jungle stretched to the horizon in every direction. Trees grew so thick their canopies blocked most sunlight. Vines hung like curtains between trunks. The air felt heavy with moisture and carried strange sounds, rustling and clicking and distant calls from creatures Owen could not identify. "Stay close," Granite ordered. "Stay alert. Stay alive. They moved into the jungle in single file. Granite took the lead with an energy cutter to clear the path. The others followed in his wake. Owen walked at the rear, his eyes taking in everything. Within an hour, he saw his first razor leaf vine. The plant grew in thick coils around a tree trunk. Each leaf had edges like serrated knives. As they passed, one of the insect beings accidentally brushed against it. The leaf scraped across the creature's shell with a sound like metal on stone. A tiny chip appeared in the otherwise perfect armor. The insect being stopped immediately and examined the damage. Click is compromised, it announced. Shell integrity reduced by 0.3%. Basswood produced a container of repair paste and carefully applied it to the chip. The seal will hold but cannot restore full strength. You must be more careful. Owen watched the whole process with interest. Their armor was incredibly strong, but completely static. Once damaged, it could be patched, but never truly healed. The chip would remain a weak point for the rest of the expedition. His skin worked differently. He had tested it many times. A cut today became a scar tomorrow and tougher tissue the day after. His body learned from every injury. They made camp that evening in a small clearing. Owen helped set up the shelters and unpack supplies. When no one was watching, he slipped away to the edge of the clearing. Just beyond the camp perimeter, he spotted something interesting. A cluster of crimson ferns grew in a tangle of thorn bushes. The expedition map marked this whole area as restricted due to high danger levels. Owen studied the thorns carefully. They were long and curved and sharp as needles. Getting to the ferns would mean pushing through them. Getting back would mean the same. He would bleed. He would hurt. But he would also prove something important. He glanced back at the camp. Everyone was busy with evening tasks. He had maybe 20 minutes before someone noticed his absence. Owen took a breath and pushed forward into the thorns. Pain came immediately and constantly. Thorns caught his shirt and tore through to skin beneath. They scraped his arms and caught his legs and scratched lines across his neck. He felt warm blood begin to flow from a dozen small wounds. His body screamed at him to stop and retreat. But Owen kept moving, slow and steady. He reached the ferns and carefully cut samples with his knife. He sealed them in collection containers. He marked the location on his personal scanner, all while blood dripped from his arms. The return journey hurt worse. He could not see the thorns behind him. They found new places to cut. By the time he emerged from the thorn field, his clothes were shredded and his skin was a map of red lines. Owen stumbled back to camp and went straight to his shelter. He cleaned the wounds quickly and applied basic bandages. Tomorrow would tell the real story. Tomorrow would show them what human skin could do. Dawn brought discovery. Owen woke to shouting outside his shelter. He sat up quickly and his bandages pulled at healing skin. The cuts from last night had already begun to close. Scabs formed over the deeper wounds. The shallow scratches had sealed completely. Click stood at the entrance to his shelter, pointing at the ground. Blood trail. The human is injured. Granite pushed past the insect being and entered the small space. The boulder-skinned alien's eyes went wide at the sight of Owen's bandaged arms. What happened? Were you attacked? Owen peeled back one bandage slowly. The cut beneath had closed into a thin pink line. I went to collect samples last night from a restricted zone. The thorn field. Basswood appeared behind Granite. You entered the thorn field? Without protective gear. Owen nodded and removed another bandage. This cut had been deeper. It still showed red and angry, but the edges had pulled together and new tissue was already forming. I needed the crimson ferns. They only grow in high-danger areas. Click pushed forward to see. One claw reached out and touched the healing wound gently. This injury is from last night? Less than 12 hours ago. Yes. Impossible. Click has seen wounds like this. They take weeks to seal properly. Owen pulled off the rest of the bandages one by one. Some cuts had healed completely. Others were well on their way. None showed signs of infection or serious damage. Human skin repairs itself constantly. Every injury triggers a healing response. Give it a few more days, and you will not even see the scars. Granite knelt down to examine Owen's forearms more closely. The alien's rocky fingers traced one of the healing cuts with something approaching wonder. Your membrane rebuilds itself, even after being torn, especially after being torn. That is what it does best. Basswood reached out and touched a spot where a scratch had already vanished. Among the Grenwood, we grow new bark, but it takes seasons. You do this in hours? The human body is designed for rapid recovery. Every cell knows how to repair damage. We evolved on a planet that constantly tested us. We learned to heal fast or die young. Click made a clicking sound of amazement. Show me the samples you collected. Owen reached into his pack and pulled out the sealed containers. Inside were perfect specimens of crimson fern, each one carefully preserved. I got everything I needed. The mission database said these plants were considered unreachable without mechanized harvesting equipment. Granite took one of the containers and studied it carefully. No machine has successfully navigated that thorn field. The thorns destroy actuators and joints. We assumed the ferns were beyond our reach. The alien looked at Owen with new eyes. You simply walked through? I bled through. Owen corrected. But yes, I walked through. Silence fell over the group. Owen could see them reassessing everything they thought they knew about human durability. Finally, Granite spoke. Perhaps we have been too cautious with you. If your skin can survive the thorn fields, then maybe you can handle moderate risk zones. I can handle any zone the team needs to explore, Owen said firmly. We shall see. Granite stood and gestured to the others. Pack your gear. Today we push deeper into the razor leaf canopy. Owen will join the advanced scouts. The expedition moved out within the hour. The jungle grew denser as they traveled. Vines hung like snakes from every branch. Leaves the size of doors blocked the path. Everything seemed designed to cut or scratch or puncture. Owen walked with the scout team, now instead of at the rear. Click kept glancing at him, as if expecting him to fall apart at any moment. But Owen moved carefully and confidently. When a vine caught his shoulder, he simply pulled free and kept walking. The scratch it left began healing before they traveled another 100 meters. They reached the razor leaf canopy by midday. Here the trees grew so close together, their branches wove into a ceiling of green and shadow. The ground was carpeted with fallen leaves. Each leaf had edges sharp enough to slice skin. Basswood gestured at a particularly dense section ahead. That area is marked as impassable on our maps. Too many razor leaves. Too many thorns. We always route around it. Owen studied the blocked area. Through gaps in the vegetation, he could see flowering plants growing in the protected space beyond. Their blooms glowed with bioluminescence. Those flowers, they're not in any database I've seen. Because no one has been able to reach them, Granite explained. The approach is too dangerous. Even our heaviest armor gets shredded attempting entry. What if armor is not the answer? Owen unslung his pack and pulled out sample containers. What if healing is better than not getting hurt in the first place? Click's shell clicked in agitation. You cannot be serious. That zone will cut you to pieces. It will cut me many times. But pieces are harder to achieve than you think. Owen checked his supplies one more time. Human skin is tougher than it looks. And it gets tougher with every injury. Basswood stepped closer. You would do this? Willingly enter an area we have marked as lethal. Your armor cannot heal. Mine can. That is the difference. Owen looked at each of them. I'm not being reckless. I am using the tools I was born with. Granite considered this for a long moment. Very well. We will wait here. You have 1 hour. If you do not return, we come looking for you. Owen nodded and turned toward the razor leaf zone. He took a breath and pushed through the first curtain of vines. Pain exploded across his skin immediately. Leaves caught his arms and drew blood in thin lines. Thorns hooked into his shirt and tore fabric and flesh together. Vines wrapped around his legs, and their serrated edges cut through his pants. Every step forward cost him blood. But Owen had learned something important last night. Pain was just information. His nerves were telling him about damage, but they were also triggering his body's repair systems. Every cut was already beginning the healing process, even as new cuts appeared. He pushed deeper. The razor leaves grew thicker here. He had to move sideways, sometimes to slip between them. Each movement brought new scratches. His arms were covered in red lines. His legs burned with 100 shallow cuts. Blood soaked into his clothes and made them stick to his skin. Then he broke through into the protected space beyond. The flowering plants grew here in a small clearing untouched by feet or claws. Their bioluminescent blooms cast a soft blue light. Owen pulled out his scanner and began recording data. He collected samples carefully and sealed them in containers. This discovery alone would make the expedition worthwhile. The return journey was worse because he was tired now and his body was starting to protest. But he pushed through the razor leaves again and emerged on the other side, bleeding and torn, but triumphant. The alien team stared at him in shocked silence. Owen's clothes hung in shreds. Blood covered his arms and legs and dripped onto the ground. His face was scratched and his hands were raw, but he was smiling. He held up the sample containers. Got them all. Full specimens plus complete skin data. Click rushed forward. You are bleeding everywhere. You need medical attention immediately. Owen shook his head. I need water and rest. The bleeding will stop on its own. Watch. He held out his arm where blood ran from a fresh cut. Even as they watched, the flow slowed and then stopped. The wound edges began pulling together. Impossible Buswood whispered. Normal, Owen corrected. For humans anyway. This is what we do. We get hurt and we heal and we get tougher each time. He sat down carefully. In a few days, these cuts will be scars. In a few weeks, the scars will fade. But the experience will stay with me forever. My body will remember this jungle and adapt to it. Granite knelt beside Owen and examined his wounds closely. You are changing our understanding of what is possible. If human skin can survive this, then perhaps other assumptions need to be reconsidered. Owen cleaned his cuts with water from his canteen. I'm just doing what my species has always done. We adapt. We heal. We survive. That night around the campfire, the aliens treated Owen differently. They asked questions about human biology and healing and evolution. They touched his scabbing wounds gently and marveled at how quickly they sealed. And when Owen finally slept, his dreams were of deeper jungles and harder tests to come. 5 days deeper into Tanglewood, and Owen no longer looked entirely human. The jungle had begun to mark him in ways that went beyond simple scars. His forearms showed a faint green tint where moss spores had settled into his skin's natural oils and started growing. The cuts on his hands had healed into tough calluses that felt more like leather than flesh. Along his neck, small seeds had caught in his sweat and sprouted, creating a collar of tiny vines that he had not bothered to remove. The expedition had reached a region called the Emberwood Deep. Here the air itself seemed hostile. Spore clouds drifted between trees like fog. Caustic mists rose from the ground in steaming pools. Plants excreted contact toxins that could blister skin on touch. The alien crew prepared for this zone with careful precision. Click and the other insect beings sealed every gap in their shells with polymer coating. Basswood and the tree people wrapped themselves in layers of treated bark that resisted acid. Granite's rock skin team applied resin to their joints to prevent toxins from seeping through. Owen simply pulled on a basic breathing mask and left his skin exposed. Basswood stopped him at the edge of camp. You cannot enter Emberwood Deep without protection. The toxins here are not like simple thorns. They dissolve living tissue. Owen adjusted his mask. I know. I have read the reports. Then you know this is suicide for someone with exposed skin. Or it is an opportunity. Owen gestured at his greenish forearms. Look at what has already happened. The jungle is starting to live on my skin. In it. With it. I am becoming part of the ecosystem. Click clicked nervously. That is not adaptation. That is contamination. You should clean those growths off immediately. Owen shook his head. The moss is protecting me. It is creating a barrier against moisture loss. The calluses are armor grown from my own cells. Even these little vines are helping by wicking away excess sweat. He touched the plants on his neck gently. I'm not fighting the jungle anymore. I'm learning to wear it. Granite approached, carrying a sealed container of protective gel. At least use this on exposed areas. It will give you some defense against contact toxins. I appreciate the offer, but no. If my skin is going to adapt to this environment, it needs direct exposure. Shielding it now means I will be vulnerable later. Owen met the alien leader's rocky gaze. Trust me. Trust human biology. The expedition moved into the Emberwood deep slowly. The caustic mists burned Owen's exposed skin on contact. He felt the sensation immediately, a prickling heat that made him want to scratch. But he forced himself to stay calm and breathe through the mask. His skin reddened where the mist touched it. Welts rose on his arms, but the tissue beneath stayed intact. After an hour of exposure, something remarkable happened. Owen's skin stopped reacting to the mist. The redness faded. The welts flattened. His body had figured out how to neutralize the toxin through sweat composition changes and pH adjustment. He was adapting in real time. Basswood noticed first. The human is no longer showing distress from the caustic air. How is this possible? Owen examined his own arms with interest. My sweat has changed. Can you smell it? It has a different scent now. My body is secreting compounds to neutralize the acid. Click moved closer and carefully tested the air near Owen's skin. Confirmed. The human is producing a basic solution. It is countering the environmental acidity. The insect being's voice held wonder. Your skin is chemically defending itself. Yes, human sweat is not just water. It carries immune cells and antimicrobials and now apparently pH buffers. We are chemical factories wrapped in flesh. They push deeper. Owen took point now, testing paths to the toxic plants. When his hand brushed a vine that oozed contact, poison his skin blistered immediately. But instead of pulling back, he kept his hand in place and watched. The blister formed and peaked, and then his body flooded the area with healing factors. The blister drained and sealed. When he pulled his hand away, new skin had formed underneath, tougher than before. Incredible, Granite rumbled. You're using injury as education. Each wound teaches your body how to defend better. Exactly. My species did not evolve armor. We evolved learning. Every exposure makes us stronger against that specific threat. By the third day in the Emberwood deep, Owen looked like a creature born from the jungle itself. The green tint on his arms had spread to his shoulders. Moss grew in the creases of his elbows. The calluses on his hands had thickened until they resembled bark. The vine collar around his neck had grown fuller, creating a living necklace. The alien team began calling him Thornkin. At first, Owen thought it was mockery, but Basswood explained it was a title of respect among the Grenwood people, given to those who carried the forest with them. On the fourth day, they found Trill. The insect scout had wandered ahead to check a path and fallen into a pit concealed by leaves. The pit's floor was carpeted with needlegrass, each blade sharp and coated with paralytic toxin. Trill's shell had cracked in multiple places from the fall. The needlegrass had penetrated the cracks and delivered its poison directly into her system. The team pulled her out quickly, but the damage was severe. Cracks spiderwebbed across her carapace. Clear fluid leaked from the breaks. The toxin had partially paralyzed her legs. We must return to the station immediately, Click declared. Trill needs medical facilities. Shell repair. Antitoxin therapy. Granite studied their position on the map. We are 6 days from the station. Trill may not survive the journey in this condition. Owen knelt beside the injured scout. He examined the cracks carefully. There's another option. The resin groves are only 2 days ahead. If we can reach them, we can seal these cracks with natural tree sap. It hardens faster and stronger than any polymer coating. 2 days through the most dangerous part of Emberwood Deep, Basswood said quietly. With an injured team member, 2 days versus 6. And the groves have medicinal plants that might counter the paralytic toxin. Owen looked at Granite. It is a risk, but it is our best chance. Granite was silent for a long moment. Finally, the alien nodded. We go forward. Thornkin leads. They fashioned a stretcher for Trill and moved as quickly as the terrain allowed. Owen took point with a new urgency. He tested every step, every handhold, every vine. When the path led through a patch of caustic ferns, he pushed through first, letting the plants burn his skin so he could map the safe route. When they encountered a field of contact poison moss, he crawled across it on hands and knees, his body taking the chemical assault so the others could follow in his clear trail. His skin accumulated damage constantly. Burns layered on burns. Blisters formed and popped and formed again. Toxic residue stained his flesh in rainbow patterns. But he did not slow down. He could not. Trill's life depended on reaching the groves in time. On the evening of the first day, Owen's skin had changed dramatically. The constant exposure to toxins had triggered an immune response that covered his arms and legs in a waxy coating his body produced naturally. It was not quite sweat and not quite oil. Something in between. A biological sealant that protected against the caustic environment. Click touched the coating carefully. What is this substance? Owen examined it himself. I think it is a specialized sebum. My skin is producing it in response to the chemical threats. It is like a natural wax layer. You are becoming waterproof, Basswood observed. Toxin-proof. Water-resistant. Thorn-resistant. The jungle is teaching my body to protect itself in new ways. Owen looked at his transformed arms. I barely recognize my own skin anymore. They reached the resin groves at dawn on the second day. Ancient trees towered here, their trunks weeping golden sap that hardened in the air. Owen approached the nearest tree and pressed his hands against the rough bark. Sap flowed over his fingers, sticky and warm. He ignored the way it glued his skin to the wood and focused on collecting it in containers. When he finally pulled his hands free, the bark came with them. Small pieces remained embedded in his palms. His skin bled from dozens of tiny tears where the sap had bonded too strongly. But he had enough resin to save Trill. Granite helped apply the resin to Trill's cracks. The sap flowed into the breaks and hardened within minutes, creating patches stronger than her original shell. The injured scout's breathing steadied. The fluid stopped leaking. She would survive. That night, Owen sat apart from the others and examined his hands. The bark pieces were still embedded in his skin. He tried to pull them out, but they had bonded too deeply. His body was already healing around them, accepting them as part of his flesh. In a few days, the bark would be permanent, a wooden armor grown into human skin. Basswood sat down beside him. You have sacrificed much for Trill. For all of us. Owen flexed his altered hands. I have gained much too. Look at what I am becoming. The forest is not my enemy anymore. It is my teacher, my partner. Every mark it leaves makes me stronger. You're changing, Thornkin, in ways that may not reverse. Owen smiled. Good. I do not want to reverse. I want to go deeper, to adapt further, to see how far human skin can go when pushed to its absolute limits. He looked toward the dark jungle beyond their camp. Somewhere out there lay the Blackspine Ridge, the most dangerous territory on Tanglewood. No expedition had ever successfully mapped it. The plants there actively hunted. The thorn struck with intelligence. It was considered absolutely impassable. Owen could not wait to try. 3 weeks into the expedition, and Owen had become a legend. Word of the human who wore the forest had spread through communication networks back to Verdant Station. Scientists requested samples of his altered skin. Medical teams wanted to study his adaptation mechanisms. But Owen ignored all the requests. He had one focus now, the Blackspine Ridge. The ridge marked the deepest penetration point into Tanglewood that any expedition had attempted. Previous teams had been forced back by the aggressive plant life. The vegetation here had evolved beyond passive defense. These plants hunted. They tracked movement. They struck with purpose. The expedition team gathered at the base of the ridge. Even Granite seemed nervous. The boulder-skinned alien checked their equipment 3 times before speaking. Protocol requires that we turn back. Our charter does not cover entry into actively hostile zones. Owen stepped forward. His appearance made the statement before he spoke. Green moss covered much of his arms, and it spread across his shoulders like a living shirt. The calluses on his hands had grown into bark-like plates. The vine collar around his neck had thickened into a protective layer. Pieces of tree bark were permanently embedded in his palms. His skin showed rainbow stains from 100 different plant toxins. He barely looked human anymore. I'm not asking anyone to follow me, Owen said quietly. But I'm going in. The plants we need grow only in the deep ridge. Specimens that could revolutionize medicine for a dozen species. I did not come this far to turn back now. Click's shell clicked in agitation. The Blackspine plants are not like the others. They do not wait for contact. They attack. They have motion sensors and striking mechanisms and tracking capabilities. I know. I have studied the reports from failed expeditions. Owen checked his sample containers one more time. Every team that tried to enter wore full armor. Heavy protective gear. They moved slowly and made lots of noise. The plants tracked them easily. What are you proposing? Basswood asked. Minimal gear. Maximum adaptation. I go in with just my skin and my knowledge. No automat. No heavy equipment. Nothing for the plants to track except one human moving through their territory. That is suicide, Granite said flatly. That is evolution in action. Owen touched the moss on his arm. Look at me. I'm already part of the forest. My skin carries jungle growth. My sweat has changed chemistry. My body temperature has adjusted to match the environment. To the plants, I might not register as a threat anymore. Trill, recovered now thanks to the resin patches on her shell, spoke up. Even if the plants do not see you as prey, they will still react to movement. The Blackspine thorns strike anything that disturbs them. Then I will learn their patterns. Every defense has a rhythm, a timing. I will trigger their strikes deliberately and map their response. My skin will pay the price, but it will heal. Their thorns will not. The team argued for another hour, but Owen's mind was made. Finally, Granite agreed to let him try under strict conditions. Owen would enter alone. The team would wait at a safe distance. If he did not return within 6 hours, they would assume the worst and head back to the station. Owen agreed to the terms. As dawn broke over the Blackspine Ridge, he stood at the threshold between survival and legend. The first thorn struck before he was 10 steps in. A vine whipped out from his left and slashed across his bicep. The thorn was black and hooked, and it tore through the moss layer and into the muscle beneath. Owen gasped at the pain, but did not retreat. He stood still and watched the vine retract. It moved with purpose, pulling back to its ready position. He counted the seconds. 7 between trigger and reset. He moved forward. Another step. Another thorn strike, this time from the right. It caught his shoulder and drew a line of blood across already scarred skin. Owen noted the angle, the timing, the force. Information was armor. Knowledge was protection. Step by step, he pushed into the Blackspine. Thorns came from every direction. They tore his remaining clothes to shreds. They opened cuts across his chest and back and legs. Blood ran freely down his body. The moss layer helped some, but the thorns were designed to penetrate. They found flesh again and again. But Owen was mapping. He memorized which plants struck at knee height and which targeted the torso. He learned that some vines had a minimum trigger distance, while others reacted to the slightest vibration. He discovered that certain paths between the plants went unmolested while others were kill zones. After an hour, he was covered in cuts and bleeding from dozens of wounds. His vision swam from blood loss. But he had mapped a safe corridor through the first section, a path that avoided the most aggressive plants and exploited gaps in the thorn coverage. He marked the route with small stones he pulled from his pockets. Then he turned back and walked out the way he had come. The thorns struck again, but he knew their timing now. He dodged some, accepted others, and when he emerged from the Blackspine, his body was a canvas of red lines and flowing blood. The alien team rushed forward, but Owen waved them back. I am fine. This is what learning looks like. Give me water and food and let me rest. Tomorrow I go deeper. Granite stared at him. You cannot be serious. You are bleeding everywhere. You need medical treatment. Owen sat down heavily and began cleaning his wounds. I need calories and hydration. My body will handle the rest. Watch. He pressed a cloth against a deep cut on his forearm. When he pulled it away moments later, the bleeding had stopped. The wound edges were already pulling together. Over the next 3 days, Owen pushed farther into the Blackspine Ridge. Each day, he went deeper. Each day, he returned more damaged, but also more knowledgeable. His skin was rewriting itself to handle the jungle. The cuts healed faster now. His blood clotted almost immediately. The moss layer grew thicker, providing more protection. Even his pain tolerance increased as his nerves adapted to constant injury. By the 4th day, Owen had reached the heart of the ridge. Here grew the prized specimens. flowers that bloomed with bioluminescent patterns found nowhere else, ferns that produced compounds with regenerative properties, vines that secreted medicinal sap. All of it had been considered unreachable. Owen harvested carefully, moving between the hunting plants with practiced grace. He knew their timing now, knew which ones to avoid and which ones to simply accept injury from. His body was a map of scars and healing wounds. His skin barely showed any original human flesh. Everything was moss or callus or embedded plant matter. On the 5th day, disaster struck. Owen was working to collect a sample from a particularly aggressive thorn vine when he misjudged the timing. The vine whipped out faster than expected and caught him across the chest. The thorn was massive, thick as a finger and sharp as a blade. It punched through the moss layer and the callous skin beneath and tore deep into muscle. Owen went down hard. Blood poured from the wound. He pressed his hands against it, but the damage was severe. The thorn had likely nicked something vital. He could feel his strength draining with each heartbeat. The safe thing would be to call for help, to trigger the emergency beacon he carried. But the expedition team was hours away, and Owen was not sure he had hours. So he did something desperate. He crawled to a nearby resin tree, the same kind they had used to repair Trill's shell. With shaking hands, he scraped fresh sap from the trunk. The golden liquid burned against his open wound, but he packed it in anyway. He sealed the gash with tree resin and vine fiber and anything else he could grab. Then he passed out. He woke to find the wound sealed. The resin had hardened into a natural patch that held the torn muscle together. His body had done the rest, flooding the area with healing factors and fighting off infection and knitting tissue back into place. He was weak, shaking, but alive. Owen pulled himself to his feet and looked at the resin patch on his chest. It was permanent now. His skin had healed around it. He carried a piece of the forest grafted directly into his body, not on his skin, in it, part of his actual physical structure. He smiled through the pain. This was what he had come for. This was adaptation at its absolute limit. Human skin pushed beyond its original design and emerged stronger on the other side. When Owen finally walked out of the Blackspine Ridge 3 days later, the alien team barely recognized him. The human who had entered was gone. In his place stood something new, something that was part human and part forest, a living bridge between two forms of life. Granite approached slowly. "You survived. We did not think it possible." Owen held up his collection containers, full of impossible specimens. "I did more than survive. I succeeded, and I learned something important." He touched the resin patch on his chest. Human skin is not just protection. It is a partnership. It learns. It adapts. It accepts the world and makes it part of itself. "You are changed, Thornkin," Basswood said softly. "Perhaps forever." Owen nodded. "That is the point." The journey back to Verdant Station took 12 days. Owen walked at the front of the expedition now, breaking trail through sections of jungle that had been marked as impassable. Where other teams had failed, he simply adapted. His skin had become something beyond human, a living interface between flesh and forest. The transformation was complete in ways that went deeper than appearance. Owen's sweat chemistry had changed so dramatically that insects no longer bit him. His skin's pH levels matched the jungle environment exactly. The moss and lichens growing on his body were not parasites anymore, but symbiotic partners. They provided camouflage and extra protection while feeding off his body's oils and dead skin cells. The bark embedded in his palms had fused with the bone beneath, creating permanent wooden armor on his hands. The resin patch on his chest had integrated so thoroughly that his heartbeat was visible through the translucent golden surface. The vine collar around his neck had rooted into his capillaries, drawing blood and nutrients while secreting compounds that enhanced his immune response. Click walked beside him in silence for several hours before finally speaking. "Does it hurt, carrying the forest inside you like this?" Owen considered the question. It did at first, but now it feels natural, like it was always meant to be this way. He touched the moss on his forearm. "My body does not see these as foreign anymore. It sees them as improvements. Will you ever return to looking human?" "I do not know. I do not think I want to." Owen looked at his transformed hands. This is evolution happening in real time. My species spent millions of years developing skin that could adapt. I'm just pushing that capability to its limit. Basswood joined them from the rear of the group. The Grenwood elders will want to meet you when we return. A being who carries living wood in his flesh is worthy of ceremony. I am just a researcher doing his job. You are far more than that now, Thornkin. You are proof that adaptation beats armor. That healing beats hardness. That cooperation with the environment beats resistance to it. They made camp that night in a clearing Owen had discovered on the outbound journey. While the others set up shelters, Owen wandered to the edge of the camp. He placed his hand on a tree trunk and felt the life flowing beneath the bark. His palm, with its embedded wood, seemed to resonate with the tree's living tissue. For a moment, Owen felt connected to the entire forest. Every root and branch and leaf. Granite found him standing there in the darkness. What are you experiencing? I'm not sure. It is like I can feel the forest breathing, growing, living. Owen pulled his hand away slowly. The barrier between me and this ecosystem is almost gone. I am part of it now. That troubles Granite. What happens when you leave Tanglewood? Will your body reject the forest? Will the forest reject you? Owen had been wondering the same thing. I suppose I will find out. But I do not plan to leave anytime soon. There are deeper jungles to explore, harsher environments to adapt to. I want to see how far this can go. The next day, they encountered another expedition heading into the jungle. This team consisted of species Owen had not met before, armored beings with metal-plated hides. They stopped and stared at Owen with a mixture of horror and fascination. Their leader, a creature whose body was covered in interlocking steel plates, approached cautiously. What manner of being are you? Plant or animal or something between? Human, Owen replied simply. Impossible. Humans have soft skin, vulnerable flesh. You look like a forest that learned to walk. Click step forward. This is Thornkin. He entered the Blackspine Ridge and survived. He wears the jungle now instead of armor. The metal-plated leader examined Owen closely. We are heading to the Blackspine ourselves. We have new cutting equipment, enhanced protective gear. Surely we can succeed where others have failed. Owen shook his head. You will fail like all the others. The plants do not care about your armor. They will find the gaps, the joints, the weak points. And once they do, your protection becomes a trap. Then what do you suggest? Leave the armor behind. Go with minimal gear. Let the jungle teach you. Let it mark you. Accept the pain and the damage and trust your body to heal. Owen held up his transformed hands. This is the only armor that works in Tanglewood. Armor that grows from experience. The metal-plated leader made a sound of disgust. We are not suicidal. We will rely on proven protection methods. Owen shrugged. Then I will see you back here in a few days. Probably injured and definitely unsuccessful. He walked past them, continuing toward the station. 3 days later, that same expedition limped back to Verdant Station. Their armor was shredded. 2 team members were seriously injured. They had not made it even halfway to the Blackspine Ridge. When they saw Owen walking around the station with his forest-covered skin, they said nothing. But the shame in their eyes spoke volumes. Word of Owen's success spread quickly through the station. Scientists rushed to interview him. Military advisors wanted to know if his adaptation could be replicated. Medical teams begged for tissue samples to study. But Owen refused most requests. This was not something that could be copied or mass-produced. This was personal evolution earned through pain and dedication. A Galactic Council representative arrived on the 5th day after their return. The being was tall and crystalline, its body made of living glass that refracted light in rainbow patterns. It studied Owen for a long time before speaking. The Council has been monitoring reports of your expedition. Your abilities have caught our attention. I am just a botanical surveyor. I collect plants. You are far more than that. You represent a capability we did not know existed. Rapid adaptation to hostile environments through biological modification. The crystalline being moved closer. The Council wishes to understand if other humans share this potential. Owen thought about that. All humans can heal. All human skin adapts to damage by becoming tougher. But most never push it this far. Most avoid injury instead of using it as education. Could it be taught? Could humans be trained to adapt as you have? Maybe, but it would require accepting pain as a teacher, welcoming scars as improvements. Most beings prefer to avoid suffering. Owen looked at his transformed body. I chose to embrace it. That made all the difference. The council representative was silent for a moment. There are other hostile worlds, other environments that resist colonization, planets we have written off as uninhabitable. Perhaps humans could survive there where other species cannot. Perhaps, if they're willing to change, to let the environment remake them. Owen smiled slightly. But that is a choice each human must make. I cannot make it for them. That night, Owen stood on an observation deck overlooking Tanglewood's endless jungle. The forest stretched to the horizon in every direction. Somewhere out there were territories even he had not explored. Deeper jungles, harsher tests, greater opportunities for transformation. Granite joined him at the railing. You're planning to go back. Granite can see it in the way you watch the forest. Yes, there's more to learn, more to adapt to. Owen touched the resin patch on his chest. I have only scratched the surface of what human skin can become. The Council is offering you a position, training other species in adaptive survival techniques. I know. I turned them down. Owen looked at the alien leader. I'm not a teacher. I am an explorer. My classroom is out there in the jungle. My lessons are written in scars. Granite made a rumbling sound that might have been laughter. Then Granite will requisition supplies for another expedition. Deeper this time, into territories we have never mapped. Owen smiled. When do we leave? 1 week, to give you time to rest and resupply. I do not need rest. My body heals while I move, but I will use the week to study maps, to find the deepest, most hostile region of Tanglewood. Owen's eyes gleamed with anticipation. I want to see what happens when I push adaptation to its absolute breaking point. Granite placed a heavy hand on Owen's shoulder. You have already gone further than anyone believed possible. What more do you seek? Owen looked down at his transformed skin, at the moss and bark and embedded plant matter, at the scars that told stories of pain and survival and evolution in action. I seek the truth about human potential, about what we become when we stop protecting ourselves from the world and start becoming part of it. He turned away from the jungle view and headed toward the Expedition Planning Center. There were maps to study, routes to plan, new dangers to identify and embrace. Behind him, Tanglewood's forest whispered in the wind. To Owen, it no longer sounded threatening. It sounded like home. 5 years passed. Owen became a legend that spread across the galaxy. Not because he sought fame, but because his existence challenged everything the spacefaring species believed about survival and adaptation. The human who wore the forest. The man who became the jungle. Thornkin. New expeditions to Tanglewood doubled and then tripled. Other humans came seeking to test their own adaptive limits. Some succeeded in minor ways, developing toughened skin and improved healing. Others gave up after the first serious injuries. But none went as deep as Owen. None transformed as completely. Owen himself had long since stopped looking human. His entire body was covered in a living ecosystem. Moss and lichen formed a natural shirt across his torso. Bark plates protected his arms and legs. Vines grew through his hair and around his limbs, rooted directly into his circulatory system. The resin patch on his chest had spread, creating a translucent window into his body where visitors could see his heart beating beneath golden tree sap. He had ventured into territories that killed entire expeditions. He had mapped regions considered mythically dangerous. He had collected specimens that revolutionized medicine for a dozen species. And through it all, his skin continued to adapt, to learn, to evolve. The Galactic Council tried 3 more times to recruit him for training programs. Each time Owen refused. He was not interested in teaching from classroom. His knowledge could only be gained through experience, through pain, through the willingness to let hostile environments remake you from the inside out. But on the 5th anniversary of his arrival on Tanglewood, something changed. A message reached Verdant Station from a frontier colony. A human settlement on a world called Ashfall had encountered a crisis. The planet's environment was turning hostile faster than expected. Volcanic activity had increased. Toxic gases were flooding the valleys where humans lived. The colonists faced a choice between evacuation or extinction. The colony administrator sent a personal plea to Owen. "We have heard of your work on Tanglewood. We need someone who understands adaptation, who can teach us to survive here instead of fleeing. Please help us." Owen read the message 3 times. He had spent 5 years refusing to teach. But this was different. These were not military advisors or scientists wanting to study him. These were ordinary humans facing an environment that wanted them dead. People who needed to learn what he had learned. He accepted. The journey to Ashfall took 2 weeks. Owen spent the time preparing a curriculum in his mind. Not lectures or theory, but practical lessons. How to read an environment's dangers. How to use injury as information. How to trust your body's healing capability. How to stop resisting the world and start partnering with it. When his ship landed on Ashfall, he stepped out into air thick with sulfur and heat. The colony had been built in a valley that was now filling with volcanic gases. The humans here wore breathing masks and protective suits constantly. They lived in sealed habitats and ventured outside only when absolutely necessary. Owen walked through the colony with his skin exposed. The sulfur burned his lungs at first, but his respiratory system adapted within hours. His skin reddened from heat, but toughened quickly. Within a day, he was breathing the toxic air without a mask. Within 3 days, his sweat chemistry had changed to help cool his body in the extreme temperatures. The colonists watched in amazement. Their administrator, a woman named River, approached him carefully. "How are you doing that? The air should be killing you. It is trying to, but my body is learning faster than the air can kill. That is the secret. Not avoiding danger, but adapting faster than it can overwhelm you." Owen gestured at his transformed skin. This did not happen overnight. It took 5 years of constant exposure and injury. But the principles can be taught. Over the next months, Owen worked with groups of colonists. He started with volunteers, people desperate enough to try his methods. He taught them to remove their protective suits for short periods, to expose their skin to the volcanic heat and sulfur, to accept the burns and trust their healing. Many quit after the first real pain, but some persisted, and those who persisted began to change. Their skin toughened, their breathing adapted, their sweat chemistry shifted. Within weeks, the dedicated students could spend hours outside without protection. Within months, they were thriving in conditions that would have killed them before. River was one of the success stories. She pushed herself harder than anyone else. Her skin developed a reddish tint from constant exposure to volcanic minerals. Her lungs strengthened until she could breathe the sulfur air for entire days without discomfort. She became Owen's first true student, proof that his methods worked for others. But not everyone succeeded. A young man named Brooks pushed too hard too fast. He removed his protective gear completely on only his 3rd day of training. The toxic gases overwhelmed his system before his body could adapt. He died in terrible pain. Owen held him as he passed, feeling the weight of responsibility for the first time. That night, Owen nearly quit. He sat alone outside the colony boundaries where the air was thickest with poison. His skin barely noticed anymore, but his mind struggled with the cost of his teaching. Brooks had trusted him and died for it. River found him there at dawn. "It was not your fault." Brooks made his own choice. He understood the risks. "I should have stopped him, should have forced him to go slower. He would not have listened. Some people are too eager, too desperate." River sat down beside him. "But others are learning at the right pace. 37 colonists can now work outside without suits. That is 37 lives you have improved. 37 people who can stay on this world instead of fleeing." Owen looked at his hands, still covered in Tanglewood's moss and bark despite years away from that jungle. "I never wanted to be a teacher. I just wanted to explore, to push my own limits. And now you're teaching others to push theirs." Brooks' death is a tragedy, but it does not erase the lives you have saved and improved. River touched his moss-covered arm. "This is your calling, Owen. Not just exploring hostile worlds, but showing others how to survive them." Over the following years, Owen developed a formal program. He called it adaptive integration. The curriculum started slow, with controlled exposure to mild environmental stressors. Students learned to read their body's responses, to distinguish between damage that would kill them and damage that would teach them, to trust the healing process. Casualties happened, not often, but regularly enough to remind Owen of the stakes. Each death hurt, but each also refined his teaching methods. He learned to screen students better, to identify those who would push too hard and hold them back, to celebrate small adaptations instead of rushing toward dramatic transformations. The Galactic Council watched his work on Ashfall with intense interest. When colonists began living openly in toxic environments that killed other species, the implications were clear. Humans had a capability that other species lacked. Not strength or speed or intelligence, but adaptability. The ability to let hostile worlds remake them and emerge stronger. A council delegation arrived 3 years into Owen's teaching program. The same crystalline representative who had visited him on Verdant Station 5 years before. It studied the colonists working in the volcanic valleys without protection. It examined rivers' transformed skin and enhanced lung capacity. It watched students going through controlled exposure training. Finally, it spoke to Owen. You have proven something the Council believed impossible. That biological adaptation can happen fast enough to matter. That evolution can be guided and accelerated through deliberate exposure. I have proven it for humans. I do not know if other species share this capability. That is what the Council wishes to discover. We have 3 other frontier colonies facing environmental crises. All different species, all desperate. Would you be willing to attempt teaching them? Owen thought about Brooks and the others who had died during training. He thought about the responsibility and the weight of guiding others through transformation. Then he thought about River and the successful students, about colonists who could now thrive in an environment that had nearly killed them. I will try, but I cannot promise success. Human biology might be unique in this capability. The attempt alone would be valuable. To know the limits of adaptation across species. Owen agreed. Over the next decade, he traveled to 7 different frontier worlds. He worked with 4 different species. 2 of them could not adapt at all. Their biology was too rigid or their healing too slow. But 2 others showed remarkable potential. Not human-level adaptation, but enough to survive in environments they had previously needed to flee. Each world taught Owen something new. Each species showed him a different approach to the challenge of hostile environments. And through it all, his own transformation continued. His body carried markers from every world he visited. Ash for volcanic planets, crystalline growths from mineral-rich atmospheres, bacterial colonies from swamp worlds. He became a living catalog of adaptation, a walking museum of survival. Eventually, Owen returned to Tanglewood, the jungle he had first explored a decade before. He walked in the Blackspine Ridge without gear or protection. The plants that had once torn him apart barely scratched his current skin. The thorns that had nearly killed him now bounced off his transformed hide. He had become something the jungle could not hurt anymore. Granite met him at the old expedition site. The boulder-skinned alien had retired from exploration, but came out for this reunion. You have changed even more, Thornkin. Granite barely recognizes the human who first arrived here. Owen smiled. I barely recognize myself, but I am grateful for every change, every scar, every adaptation. He touched a black-spine thorn that had once meant death. Now it felt like greeting an old teacher. This jungle taught me what I was capable of. It showed me that human skin is not a weakness. It is our greatest strength. And now you teach others what the jungle taught you. I try. Not everyone can learn. Not every species can adapt. But those who can, those who trust the process, they discover something profound. Owen looked at his hands covered in moss and bark and mineral deposits from a dozen worlds. They discover that we are not separate from the environments we inhabit. We are part of them, and they are part of us. Years later, Owen stood before a class of mixed-species students on a training station orbiting Tanglewood. His body was a masterpiece of adaptation. Every visible inch of skin told a story of survival and transformation. Scars layered on scars. Plant matter growing in symbiosis with human flesh. Mineral deposits, creating natural armor. Chemical stains, mapping the toxic environments he had conquered. A young insect being with pristine shell raised a claw nervously. Does it hurt? Letting the world mark you like that. Owen ran his fingers along the resin patch on his chest, the scar from his near-death experience in the Blackspine Ridge so many years ago. Every mark hurt when I earned it, but now they are proof. Proof that I survived. Proof that I adapted. Proof that I am still here. He looked at each student in turn. You wear armor to avoid the thorns. I wear the thorns themselves, and I will outlive them all. That is the human way. We do not conquer our environments. We do not resist them. We become them. We adapt. We heal. We endure. The class sat in silence, absorbing his words. Owen smiled. Somewhere a new frontier world was developing an environmental crisis. Somewhere colonists needed to learn adaptation or face extinction. And Owen would be there to teach them what 5 years in Tanglewood's jungle had taught him. That human skin was never meant to be armor. It was meant to be a bridge, a living interface between human and world. And that bridge, properly understood and deliberately pushed, could carry humanity to places no other species could survive. The lesson was never about being untouchable. It was about being unkillable, about healing faster than the universe could break you, about carrying your scars as proof of survival instead of shame. That was the human gift. That was what Owen had discovered in the thorns and taught in the flames. And that was what would carry humanity to the stars and beyond.